Okay, all right, there we go. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Have attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We've got full crew here. Thank you for everyone settling into your spots. And hopefully you were able to watch the videos to remain on track with where we are in the class. Go ahead, open up your notes. We are with Queen Elizabeth, with the transition from, actually, who was queen before Queen Elizabeth? Who was queen before Queen Elizabeth? Mary. Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary had what in common? Same mother? Same father. Exactly, same father, Henry VIII. Didn't Henry VIII also have another kid that became a monarch? He had 3 kids that became monarch. And who got to be the monarch first? Either of the older girls? No, the boy. How come the boy? Because boys are better? Is that what they thought back then? Yeah, they did. I mean, they clearly did. That was a point that we were making on this. That was the whole drama behind Henry VIII going, I need to have a son. So he got divorced from his first wife and got through all that drama and so forth, had a second wife, and his second wife gave birth to a girl. And then his third wife gave birth to a boy. Did he have any kids with wife number 4, 5, or 6? No, he didn't. All right, so we're going to get back into all of that drama going on in England. And England's particularly important because, I mean, yeah, it's a European country and we're focusing on Europe, but England's going to be very important because it's going to have a lot to do with the creation of our country, right? Because we gained our independence from Britain, okay? So we're going to be going through that process just by way of an update. In case you hadn't noticed, there was a presidential election and a national election last week. This is the latest. News media organizations on Saturday morning. Have you been on this planet? Did you guys know that news media organizations had determined that when all the votes are counted and and all the various different states, that Joe Biden would have 270 or more electoral votes? And this is actually considering Georgia hasn't been officially called, but if you add Georgia in there with another 16, that would make it 306, which is an interesting number. That's enough, and it was exactly the same number that Donald Trump had in 2016 that elected him to become president of the United States. So, looks like they're going to do a recount in Georgia. Will that make the difference if that flipped? If you had, there's about a 12,000 vote margin, just under. If that ended up being different, would that make so that Donald Trump would be the president again? No, 16 wouldn't make the difference. For Trump to be able to prevail, he would have to have things change probably in like 2, maybe even 3 states, depending on how big they were. Pennsylvania has got a margin now of what is that, like 48,000? So if there is credible evidence of things being done not properly and so forth in elections, the courts will have an opportunity to look at that. But my guess is that come January 20th, we will have a different person, Joe Biden, taking the oath of office. And yes, since some of you guys are so concerned about how my wall is going to look, I will have to add Joe Biden there. And I think what I'll probably do is take off the bottom row, right? Because it's all taped. There's all individual, separate 9.5 by 11 or whatever. And I'll take off the bottom row and I'll add Joe Biden right next to Trump. I'll have to actually change out the Trump one because it says 2017 until question mark. So we'll put another one in there to replace it, and that'll be 2017 to 2021, January 2021. And then we'll shift it all over slightly so you'll have an equivalence. So Nixon will stick out a little bit. I'll move the Romney poster over. I'll move my Uncle Reed's poster over a little bit. And then we'll have it there. Is that going to be okay? No? Becca's like, no. What do you want? Do you want me to get rid of one of these presidents? I just want that symmetry. I want that perfectness and stuff. hey, the country decided, and now I have to change my wall, okay? So that's just the way it is. You're just going to have to deal with it. But one thing is actually very interesting because, when you get somebody running for office, they're like, if elected, I want to do this, 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 and this, right? So Joe Biden, if I get elected, I want to do this, 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 and this. Well, you guys are going to discover next semester when we start getting into more of the history associated with the United States of America that there's a little thing called the United States Congress, right? My dad, Orville Hanson, was in Congress. He was in the House of Representatives way back when. And he was, unlike my brother, Jim Hanson, who was a Democrat, my dad is a Republican. And at the time, my dad was a Republican. And the Democrats were in the majority in the House, which it looks like they're in a bare majority. This is actually pretty close. And the Republicans actually picked up some seats. 6 seats already. Oh, we got some updates here. Okay, 6 seats. So that's very, very close. And of course, the Democrats probably still going to be controlling that. The presidency, the House, but what about the Senate? On this one, it looks like the Republicans, I'm guessing that this North Carolina seat and this Alaska seat will eventually go for the Republicans. We'll put that at 50. If they just stay at 50, who breaks a tie in the Senate? Anybody have any idea? Yep. Yep. Vice President. Yeah, and so if you got Biden as the president, who's the vice president going to be? Kamala Harris, exactly. So she, as a Democrat, would break the tie in favor of the Democrats. But down here in Georgia, they got a full 6-year Senate seat and then a partial one, I think for like 2 years because somebody left partway through. And they're going to have runoffs on January the 5th, right? They allow a whole bunch of people to run, and nobody got more than 50% of the vote in one of them. Purdue came pretty close in the one. So those are 2 different races. Those will be decided on January 5th, so there'll be a lot of attention on that. But I think it's going to be close. So long and short of it, come next year, who's going to have to work together in Washington to help solve the problems of this country? Republicans? Democrats? Both? Is that possible? I think so. It's been done in the past, and on certain things they can get some things through, like on COVID and so forth. All right, so anyway, there's your update. Any questions that you guys have about that? Y'all good? Okay. How many of you guys knew people that were sad at the results of the election? How many of you guys knew people that were happy with the results of the election? How many knew people that were like both? Yeah, so it's kind of like, well, I'm happy for this, and I'm sad for this, and I empathize with this, but the election is over. Let the preparations for the next election begin. That's how we roll in America. We are a democracy. And the next federal elections for all of the House seats are 2 years from now. When's the next presidential election? You guys know this, right? When's the next presidential election? How long is the president in there for? 4 years, yeah, exactly. Trump was elected in 2016, and it looks like Biden's got it for 2020. And then there'll be another election in 2024. So who knows how that's all going to play out. Should be very, very interesting. Okay? All right. Let's get to this. Well, last we left off, we had the King Henry VIII. He had, this is the ditty. It actually rhymes. If you're trying to remember the names of the wives of Henry VIII and what happened to them, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. That is the ditty. That is the rhyme. Catherine, Anne, Jane, Anne, Catherine. Right? He only had, as far as his wives are concerned, there was only 3 names. But he did one of them twice and another of them 3 times. Those were the wives of Henry VIII. So when Henry VIII died, who became king? This one right here, Edward. Why was it? Let me just check and see if you watched the videos. Why was it that Edward did not rule for long? Did he get murdered? Did he die very young? Yeah, right. Make sure you have that written down in your notes. He did die very young. Was he married? I mean, they married very young back in those days, especially the arranged marriages. Was he married? No, he was not married. Okay. Okay, so there you go. Yeah, I mean, he was like, I want to say he was about your age, maybe a little bit even younger. Okay? And so, yeah, he will not rule for very long. And then he's gone. And so then who gets to become the next monarch? He didn't have a wife. If you marry the king, you don't get to become like the next monarch. It goes to the next kid. Who was the oldest of Henry VIII's kids? Yeah? Yeah, Mary. There we go. Little Mary, although she's not so little anymore. And what is she? Is she like her dad? Is she like, because her dad was, let me see, what was his religion ultimately? He was Catholic, but then he changed the church over to so the Church of England, the Catholic Church in England, is going to be now the Anglican Church and is Protestant. Did she agree? Did she agree with her papa? No. What did she want the religion of her country to be? Catholic. Very, very important. Make sure you write that down. Little Mary, who will be Mary the First of England, she definitely wants her country to be Catholic. And she feels very strongly about that. Her dad was more like, hey, whatever, I don't want you to be disloyal to me. I want you to be, Anglican. If you want to be Catholic or you want to be like a Puritan Protestant or something, just don't mess with me. Is that how Mary looked at it? Was she all like, hey, whatever, do your own thing? Or was she more insistent? How many of you guys are like, yeah, she was insistent? How many of you guys are like, no, she was chilling. He was like, you do whatever. She was insistent. That's why she goes down in history by the name Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. Now, she actually didn't bloody people so much. She more like put them to a crisp. So here is a leading Protestant bishop, and she was going after leading members of society who didn't agree with her on religion. Okay? She felt very, very strongly about that. She was married to the top person within the Habsburg family. Yes, I know it's like all these different like relatives and so forth, because here she is, child of Catherine of Aragon, and Catherine of Aragon's sister Joanna was actually the grandmother of Philip II, Mary's husband. And if they had had kids, those kids, or the son, could have been the ruler of England and the ruler of Spain. Did she become pregnant and have a child with her husband, the ruler of Spain, the Catholic ruler of Spain? No. What happened? What's that? Yeah, we're going to see Elizabeth's going to become the rule. Yes, go for it. There was a lot of that kind of, because if you're looking for, for your royal family kids, you're looking for royal marriages, and there's only so many royal families in Europe, and if you want like the same royal family, so then you start getting like, the cousins things and so forth like that. I think theirs is probably like a second cousin-ish thing. They didn't actually have a pregnancy as a result of that. Philip II was like really keen on their, having a child that would perhaps rule both. But the only thing that Mary got, raise your hand if you can tell me, what did Mary get? Yep. She got a tumor. She had a cancerous tumor. It was growing inside of her. And she's like dying. And she's really concerned because she's dying. She's like, I wasn't real excited about the prospect of my sister, Elizabeth, who she would look and go, Elizabeth, you're not truly legitimate. Because truly, that first marriage that Henry VIII had with Catherine, Mary says that divorce should have never happened. That was wrong. And so therefore, the fact that Elizabeth came along with the so-called second wife, that's illegitimate. But nevertheless, it's there. So Mary, Queen Mary, before she dies, has a conversation with her half-sister. And she wants to know about her half-sister, are you going to, let's see if we can get that, no. Are you going to have the church remain Catholic? Or are you going to do like Papa did and make it into a Protestant Anglican faith? That's a pretty intense question to ask. And this was after she had put her sister, Mary had put Elizabeth in the Tower of London, under lock and key. Put a little pressure on her. Right? How many of you guys have ever been interviewed by a parent or somebody and asked a question and you're like, I really feel compelled to answer a certain way. I know it would benefit me, but you're thinking, I don't know if I really want to do that. What is Elizabeth going to say? What do you say when your sister comes up to you and says, are you going to keep it Catholic? By the way, when Elizabeth becomes queen, write it down. When Elizabeth becomes queen, did she keep it Catholic? She did not keep her country Catholic. She did not. I've got a little scene I want to play for you from a movie. And Kate Blanchett, the actress, the English actress, plays the role of Elizabeth. And in this particular scene, she's still Princess Elizabeth. Mary is the queen, her sister, half-sister, is the queen, and she brings her in to ask her to put some pressure on her to say that she would be Catholic. Let me play this scene for you. I think it's a powerful scene and well worth watching in this circumstance. Here we go. There is Queen Mary. There's Elizabeth.
When I look at you, I see nothing of the king, only that poor, your mother.
Oh, that's not very nice.
Never did anything so well as the cut of something. He was also my father.
Why will you not confess your crimes against me?
I have committed none.
You speak with such sincerity. I feel you are still a consummate actress.
My husband is gone. I have poisoned my child. They say it is a tumor. Madam, you are not well.
They say this cancer will make you queen, but they are wrong. Look there, this is your death warrant. All I need do is sign it.
Whoa.
You will be murdering your own sister. You will promise me something? When I am gone, you will do everything in your power to uphold the Catholic. Do not take away from the people the consolations of blessed virtue, their holy mother. When I am queen, I promise to act as my conscience dictates.
Ooh.
The queen is wrong. You may return to your own house at Hatfield, but you will remain there under arrest until I am recovered.
Wow. Yeah. She dodged that one. Barely. This is a powerful thing. Write it down. Elizabeth is going to prove wrong that feeling that so many people had in those days that a woman could not do the job of monarch. She ends up being a very successful monarch in England. Okay? Not Mary. Mary is going to be one that's going to be reviled over history. But Elizabeth is going to be given a much, much more favorable assessment by her people at the time and by historians. And this is remarkable, particularly because she was a woman. And her father was disappointed when she was born and not being a boy. Her father felt that girls couldn't do the job. She proved him wrong. She got an education as a member of the royal household, so that's going to help quite a bit. And she made observations of all the things going around her. She knew, and you could see at that particular time, her life was very, very vulnerable, wasn't it? I mean, because her sister could have gone, yep, that's it. I'm going to get rid of my sister. Sign the death warrant. But she didn't. So what does Elizabeth know when she goes in to become the next monarch? What is she going to do? How is she going to rule? How is she going to keep her country safe and her own self safe? That's going to be a real challenge. Let's get first to the religious issue. She doesn't need a divorce, like her dad needed a divorce, and that was why he took the Church of England away from the Pope. Her sister, Mary, had already returned it to being under the Pope again. So what did Elizabeth do? Is she going to ultimately, her conscience, is it going to say, let's just keep the Catholic faith? No. She does something very interesting. She does what her dad did. Write this down. She, along with the nobles in Parliament, right, because we talked about that, the nobles have a lot of power in England. They gained power hundreds of years before in a fight with King John. And the nobles had Parliament. And the best way for England to work was when the nobles and the king, or whoever the monarch was, were kind of on the same page. They were working together. And that's what Elizabeth wanted to do. So, in consultation with the top nobles, they decided to make the Church of England Protestant again. Okay? So the way it was under her dad. So then, therefore, who would be, Blake, the head religious person in England? Exactly, yeah. Okay? So if she got married, she could give herself a divorce, for example. All right? Some people weren't happy about that. Write that down. There will be Catholics, particularly ones that were like, hey, we got it back under Mary, but Mary kind of overdid it. I think if Mary had been a Catholic ruler that maybe kind of like was a little bit more chill and sort of like, hey, I'm Catholic and these guys aren't completely Catholic, but maybe we can make this work. The fact that she put leading Protestants to the stake, killed them, made Mary's view, Mary's solution of having a Catholic church look very radical. Okay? Question? No. Okay? So it looked like, so Elizabeth was like, okay, I'm going to make it Protestant, but I'm going to make it the way Dad had it, King Henry VIII. Which is what? Full-on Protestant like John Calvin or Martin Luther? No. What were some of the only things, Keith, what was the only big difference between, say, the Church of England under Henry VIII and then also Elizabeth and the Catholic Church?
Well, I mean, the big difference between Mary ruling...
No. Between actually the Catholic Church and the Church of England, the Anglican Church. What was like the biggest differences?
Well, the biggest difference was that instead of the Pope, we had the center of the church.
That was the first one, right? And then there was one other one, which is important to some people, I suppose, if you're a priest within the faith. What was the biggest difference as far as the priest job or the priest circumstances around the priest? Did you pick up on that on the video? Raise your hand if you can tell me. What's the biggest difference between, say, a Catholic priest and an Anglican priest? The Anglican priest could get married. That was one of the changes that Henry VIII had done, and then Elizabeth will continue that. And so Anglican priests can do that. But if you walked into a service, a church service, during the time of Henry VIII, or even later during Mary, and then later during Elizabeth, were the services that different? No, they were very similar in the kind of prayers and the practices and so forth. Okay? There will be other people in England, and there's going to be, it's almost like you sort of, now you open it up. You've got Anglicans, you've got some Catholics in the country, you've got some Puritans in the country. So, is it going to be bloody Elizabeth, bloody Elizabeth, bloody Elizabeth? Is she going to crack down on people who have religious faith that's different from her? No. In fact, write this quote down. She said, and I think I'm quoting correctly, I do not wish to make windows into men's souls. That's what Elizabeth says. I don't want to make windows into men's souls. I'm not that interested in looking at what is true in their heart of hearts as far as their religious faith. If they're really Puritan or really Catholic and they're not really like the Anglican that she has officially set up, is that a problem? What would be the one thing, you suppose, Bella, that she would be like, if you really, really, really feel this way, then I'm going to get you? No, actually, I mean, that's interesting because we're going to look as we go forward, we're going to see some people who have some religious beliefs that are like even outside of that. But if she says, I'm queen, and you say, no, you're not, because your mother was never really, truly a queen, and therefore you're illegitimate, and therefore you shouldn't be queen, it should be some Catholic, what do you suppose Elizabeth might say to that? Yeah, exactly. So were there people, write this down, were there people in England out to get Elizabeth? Yes, there were conspirators. They were out to get Elizabeth. They wanted her dead. And in fact, this is really kind of like, really? The Pope did this? I thought popes, I don't know, back in those days, I mean, there were some issues having to do, and it helped to create the Protestant Reformation as far as popes. There were popes who put out hits on Elizabeth. You're like, what? They would say to some people who would come to the Pope would go, can you get rid of Elizabeth? They were like assassins. They were going into England with the Pope's blessing, that if you can remove Elizabeth, then you will be blessed. That's a really odd thing for the head of a religion to do, but that's kind of where things were. The Pope's looking, he's going, wow, Elizabeth came back in, that's not very good. And the Pope had somebody in mind. The Catholics had somebody in mind. Let's go ahead and identify this person. Mary, the Queen of Scotland. She's a cousin to Elizabeth. So what? She's a cousin to Queen Elizabeth. What difference does that make? She's got her own country up to the north of England. Mary, Queen of Scots. Well, who would be the person who would take over after Elizabeth when Elizabeth finally dies? Isn't it going to be one of her kids? I mean, it would be one of her kids, except there's this one little problem. How many kids did she have? 0. Well, how many husbands did she have? 0. As the monarch, who's in charge of arranging her marriage to a man? She is. Write that down. She's in charge. It's like, whoa, she gets to make a decision on her own, like, marital choice. And I tell you what, there were plenty of men, and like leading men, princes and so forth from all the different countries in Europe. In fact, her brother-in-law, I kid you not, Philip II of Spain, he's like, well, you know, Mary's dead. How about you marry me? And Elizabeth's like, no, that's not going to work out. And there were French royalty. Nope. It was Russians, Swedes, and so on. She even had like a very close friend who she was raised up with, an English noble guy, and she was like, maybe I should marry him. There was one problem. He was already married. Although, his wife died. What happens when your wife dies? Can you get married again? Although it was very suspicious because his wife died from a fall down a staircase. Although people said, maybe it wasn't a fall down a staircase. Maybe it was a push and then a fall down a staircase. As it was, write this down, Elizabeth made the decision not to get married. She felt like if she got married to somebody who was a leader from another country, that it would drag England into European conflicts. So, for example, if she married into like the Spanish royal family, then maybe England would be dragged into a fight between Spain and France. If she married into the French royal family, then she would be dragged into that was her consideration. So she didn't have any kids. She will go down forever in history, be known as the Virgin Queen. The Virgin Queen. And unlike her dad, who was, I'm going to get into all the details of this and so forth, but there is a difference between genders, male and female, okay? When their intimacy occurs and so forth and a pregnancy result, who does it show most clearly? On the female or the male when a pregnancy results? 9 months after the pregnancy occurred, who's like very pregnant? Hello? The female. Right? So Henry was off doing this, that, and so forth. Could Elizabeth have that same kind of like reckless behavior outside of it? Because she never got married. No. She will have no kids. She will be the Virgin Queen. Do you understand that? And in fact, The first English colony. Ooh, let's start to talk about the Americas, because that's where she was thinking. She's thinking, my country shouldn't be focused so much on all these European things. I want to turn my country's attention to, the Americas. We'll get into more of that later. But the Americas, anybody know? What was the name of the very first English permanent colonial settlement in the Americas? I went to school just down the road when I went to William and Mary, just down the road. The very first settlement was a permanent settlement. It's called Jamestown. And the whole colony itself was named after Elizabeth. Elizabethia? No. Jamestown, the first colony, is located in the state or commonwealth of, anybody know? Starts with a V, rhymes with Virginia, yes? Virginia, yes, it was named after Elizabeth. Virginia, virgin, queen. The Virginia is named after Elizabeth. Right? They used to have I think they still do, they have a slogan for Virginia. They call it, ironically, Virginia is for lovers. So it's like, hey, whatever, Virginia. So that was the first English colony. How many colonies are they ultimately going to have in the Americas? 13? How do you know that number? That's really weird. 13? How many of them ultimately say, adios? I don't know, that's Spanish, but we're leaving. We want to become independent. 13? I don't know, we don't count Canada because, and we'll get to the whole Canadian issue. They didn't want to go along with it. So Elizabeth is focusing on the Americas and so forth, but there's still an issue. Write this down. Who takes over after Elizabeth is gone? If she has no kids, who's going to take over? Her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. Her cousin. Now this is where things get dramatic. Let's do a little role playing, shall we? I need someone to play the role of Elizabeth. Do we have a volunteer? No, seriously? Put your hand up if you want to be Elizabeth. We'll give you important decisions to make. Okay, there we go. I saw your hand. You're Elizabeth, okay? Now we need someone to be Mary, Queen of Scots. The guys are like, I don't want to take on that role. Some years I'll get the guys going, I want to do that. I want to do that. So you're Mary, Queen of Scots, right? You're Mary, Queen of Scots. So let's talk about you first, all right? So Elizabeth is taking care of business in England. Write this down. She's working with the nobles. She's being fairly tolerant. That's a key word. Write that down. Fairly tolerant of people's religions, right? The only Catholics she's really coming after are the ones that want her dead and who aren't going to say, oh yeah, sure, yeah, you should be queen. If they're just like, oh, well, I just want to do my religious service a little different, or I want to do, I still want to respect the Pope and yada, 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 fine. Mary, Queen of Scots, write this down about Mary, Queen of Scots. Her situation up in Scotland is going to be very dramatic and very chaotic. First of all, she's not really Scottish. She's from a French family. And so she was born into the whole Scottish royal thing. She's from a French family. Oh, and here's the key thing. Write this down. Key detail about Mary, Queen of Scots. She's Catholic. And very Catholic. Kind of like Bloody Mary. Sometimes the two are confused. Mary, Queen of Scots, is Catholic. She comes up to Scotland. She's the queen. Very Catholic. She gets married, and all kinds of drama occurs. She's not really happy with her husband, and actually works with others to kill her first husband, which is really a mess. It gets so messed up. Long story short, Mary, Queen of Scots, things go so chaotic up in Scotland, which is predominantly a Protestant country. You can write that down. Scotland is predominantly Protestant. They've got a queen, Mary, Queen of Scots, who's Catholic, but they're not real happy the way things sort of shake out. She has her first husband killed and is implicated in all the drama and so forth, and eventually the nobles, the leaders up in Scotland, they put her in jail. They stick her in jail. She manages to escape. She gets out of jail, and she heads to England. Write this down. She goes to England. Mary, Queen of Scots, is going to be in England. Drama, drama, drama. Now that Mary, Queen of Scots, is in England, Mary, Queen of Scots says to her cousin, Elizabeth, won't you please give me an army so that I can go back up to Scotland and take power over again? Well, are you going to give her an army? Oh, no. Well, that was quick. Write that down. She does not give her an army. In fact, up in Scotland, Mary, Queen of Scots, had a son, a little boy named James. And James, although he's very little, he is recognized as the new king of Scotland. And his uncle or some other older relative and so forth is basically running the country until James gets older. And those guys are up there, and they're Protestants, and they're running the show up there. And so Elizabeth says, no, I'm not going to help you out. So I'm thinking Mary, Queen of Scots, is thinking, I don't know, would you want to stick around in England? Or do you want to go hang out with your family in France and see if you can raise an army there? All right? So, would you like to leave the country? Go raise an army? Yeah. Can she leave?
No.
Wow, write that down too. Mary, Queen of Scots, I should say ex-Queen of Scots. And now she's hanging in England. She's like, I escaped to England, and now I can't escape from England. She is put on house arrest. She's not actually put into a prison, but she's put into a house. Okay? Not a bad house, and she's got servants around her and so forth. But Elizabeth is like, you can't leave. I mean, how long is that going to go on? Like for a month? A year? I want to say it ends up being somewhere in the order of 15 to 18 years. She is stuck in England, right? Now, here's the deal. Because there are people who are thinking, we want to get rid of Elizabeth. And they try to get rid of Elizabeth. They try very hard, right? But Elizabeth has got somebody, I need a Sir Francis Walsingham. You're like, who the heck is that? Her spy master. Do we have a volunteer spy master? Oh my gosh, you guys. You're the volunteer spy master, okay? You are going to protect your queen. It is your job. Write this down. Francis Walsingham, among others, but he's a top spy master. You will do anything to secure the safety and personal integrity of your queen. So what are you going to do? You're going to spy. Because there's people out there that want to kill the queen. And they want to replace the queen with, I don't know, who would be next in line? Oh, who's next in line? The cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. And she's sitting there right in England. And she's Catholic. And she wants to restore the Catholic Church as the official Church of England. And she's sitting there under guard, sort of, although she gets nice house and things and so forth. And there's people around, you're sure of it, that are trying to kill the queen and so forth. You do everything you can. Write this down. You've got spies all over the place trying to find out who is going to try and get Elizabeth. Now, some of the conspirators are not stupid enough to go, hey, I'm going to try and do this and that and so forth. And some of them are caught. And they're killed. You execute somebody who's going to try and kill the queen. But somebody has an idea. One day, are you ready, Mary? You get a message. A concealed message. Because you can't just take messages. Somebody can't just walk in and so forth. You got a secret message. And it's one of those ones maybe you get in middle school. There's do you like so-and-so? Mark yes or no. You ever get any of those? No? You don't get any of those? Okay, you still get some of those? Okay, you got some of those? Yeah. Anyway, so you get a message. One day you open up this secret message, and it says, will you, I don't know, marry King Philip of Spain and help participate in killing Elizabeth? She's kept you in house arrest for 18 years. They want to know if you would be participating in a plot to kill the queen. Wow, you said yes? Why did you say yes? You'd kill your cousin? What has she ever done wrong to you besides keep you under lock and key for 18 years? Wow. Write that down. Mary, Queen of Scots, actually did give an affirmative answer. Did give a response as in yes. Now, hey, Walsingham, over here, spy master. Wouldn't you like to know about this? I mean, isn't that important information? That this person right here is like trying to like go in a plot to kill the queen? Wouldn't you like to know that? Did you know that? What do you mean you didn't know it? It's your job. You need to know these things. It's not like you set it up, did you? Would you do something like that? Would you send a fake message to Mary, Queen of Scots, acting like it's all real, just to get her on record as wanting to kill the queen? Would you do? He did. Write it down. It was a total setup. It was a total setup. And Mary, Queen of Scots, not too clever. She fell for it. She agreed to it. And so now Francis Walsingham goes to Queen Elizabeth and says, here, we have proof. Your cousin, who you have kept in prison, provided for all these last 18 years, is trying to kill you. Will you now sign her death warrant? She's trying to kill you, even though it was kind of a fake because it was all a setup. But nevertheless, there it is. She's going to kill you? Well, you were going to like go along with killing her. Yeah, you guys got all the right answers. Yeah. Elizabeth signed the death warrant. Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed 1588 for the crime of treason, for the attempt, agreeing to an attempt to kill her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. Elizabeth. Way to go, Francis Walsingham. And there is a depiction at the time of the execution. Mary is brought in. You got all the scenes of Mary walking in, and then Mary bending over, and then Mary having her head chopped off. Boom! Bam! The treason is done. Now, here's a question where you're paying attention. If Elizabeth dies, and she will eventually, and her cousin now is dead, who's going to take over for England? That was a quick hand. Think about it, everyone. If Mary is gone, who will become the next monarch of England? You think, is that your answer? Yeah, write that down. It would be Mary's son. And in fact, that's what Elizabeth, she's kind of like, well, he's the king up in Scotland. I suppose he could be the king in England after I'm gone. And guess what? James will be the king of England and Scotland. But not before Spain tries to get Elizabeth. In 1588, the Spanish Armada is assembled. The King of Spain, Philip II, is like, that's it. I'm fed up to here with Elizabeth. Ugh. I'm going to send a fleet of ships, and it's going to go, and it's going to arrive in England. It's going to land on the shores, all these soldiers, and they're going to go grab Elizabeth, and they're going to kill her, and they're going to remove her. Woo! Elizabeth's like, I'm ready. Bring it. So what does Elizabeth have that gives her some sense that she's going to be able to fight off these Spanish ships? Because they sail from Spain, and they go up to, like, the Netherlands, where they've got a lot of troops up in the Netherlands, and then they're just going to go right back over. What has she got? The Scottish are going to help her out. The Scottish aren't that much use. There's one thing in England, it's a very important point. If you remember this, you're going to be it's going to help you a lot as you go forward in history. If you're England, what part of your military do you need to make sure is really, really good to keep your country safe from threats? The army? Not bad. Who else would you say?
I don't remember.
What is the name of the people on the water? It's called the Navy. Write it down. England relies on its Navy. If you are an island country and you don't want to be attacked by the sea, you need to make sure you have some good ships. As it turns out, on that occasion, England had some good ships, and they actually lit them on fire. Take a look at this. They lit some of their ships on fire and loosed them among the Spanish ships, creating fire and chaos and havoc. And that Spanish Armada quickly had to break apart and sail up into the North Sea, and the winds were wild, and the winds were crazy, and the Spanish Armada, write this down, it completely failed. 1588, the Spanish Armada failed. Way to go, Queen Elizabeth. You done good. You held your country together. You stayed alive. You handled the problem of your cousin who was actually out to get you. Oops. And you stayed alive, and you passed the throne on to the next one, little James. Okay? And I believe that's all the time we have. So next time, we'll pick it up from that point. Very good. Her cousin's son. Yeah, James. Yeah, we'll get that next time. Okay, good. Oh, got to turn this off. Remind me to turn it off.